lawmakers in Ukraine have voted to restore the independence of anti-corruption agencies. The vote reverses a controversial law passed earlier this month and sparked unprecedented mass protests. Protesters cheered outside Parliament after the vote. Demonstrators had been gathering there for days to demand the scrapping of a previous law that gave the government more control over anti-corruption authorities. Ahead of the vote, politicians held protests during the debate in Parliament. Supporters hope the decision will defuse a political crisis spiked by President Zelenskyy, giving the prosecutor general oversight over the anti-graft agencies. Straight to our correspondent, Rebecca Ritters in Kyiv. Welcome, Rebecca. Tell us more about this vote.
Well, I'm standing outside the Rada, the Parliament, the Ukrainian Parliament, where that vote has just taken place. And unfortunately now you can't see the many protesters who was here, but there was certainly a resounding cheer, as you just heard there from the crowd, as soon as that bill was announced that it had been voted in favour, 331 votes after a relatively short debate. Now, it wasn't clear going into the vote that President Zelensky's party would be able to get the votes needed to pass the bill. There was a bit of conjecture, some uncertainty, but now as we now see that has passed with a clear majority, 331, as I just mentioned, and the crowd here were exceptionally excited. There was a huge uproar, a roaring of the crowd, I should say. These people have been out in the streets for over a week now since that original bill to roll back the independence of these two anti-corruption bodies was passed last week. And the people I spoke to said they're incredibly happy with how this has turned out. They said that they were going to keep coming out to show their democratic voice, that they didn't want to fight for a country that was going to roll back into what they were calling authoritarianism. Now, the government is framing this as a win. It's also framing this in a positive light, saying that, you know, this is a democratic country because we've listened to the people and we've heeded the voices and we've now acted upon it. So, you know, certainly a very happy moment here in the park.
Is the presumption, therefore, that President Zelenskyy will sign into law a bill that goes against the measure that he supported originally?
It is expected that he will sign the bill, and it is a bit confusing. I can understand, you know, I think everyone, even us reporters who are following this closely, are a bit confused as to the back and forth as to why President Zelenskyy brought this bill forward in the first place and now has done a 180. Well, it's clear why he's done the 180, because of the internal and external pressure that was put on him, both from the people here protesting, but also from the European Union. I mean, anti-corruption measures were a huge factor when it comes to potential EU accession. There has been a briefing from the EU, and they've said that they are very pleased with these steps, but that they're going to have to look at the bill closely. It is expected that he will sign this new bill, which of course counters the last week's bill, but this is a bill that President Zelenskyy himself brought to the Parliament, so it's very unlikely that he won't be signing it today.
Thanks for that, Rebecca. DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters in Kyiv.
Those changes sparked huge protests and concerns by Ukraine's Western partners. DW's Mike Zander reports.
These young people in Kyiv say they're fighting for their democracy, not against the Russians, but on the home front. Last week, the government put two independent anti-corruption agencies under the supervision of the prosecutor general. That's a job appointed by the president. The law effectively stripped NABU and SAP of their independence. The government says it was a move to counter Russian interference. Others see it differently.
I think that when independent anti-corruption agencies became too close to the inner circle of President Zelenskyy, he got irritated, and that was the final reason for the decision to crack down both agencies.
Transparency International's National Corruption Perception Index puts Ukraine at 105 out of 180 countries and gave it just 35 out of a possible 100 points last year. That doesn't sound great, but Ukraine managed to improve by 10 points in about a decade, at least in part prompted by aims to join the European Union. But more work needs to be done.
We love transparency and accountability, but we not always can get it. So I would say that the petty level corruption went down With the top-level corruption, there is still issues.
Corruption scandals have made international headlines even during the war. In 2023, Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov resigned after a procurement scandal. The ministry was accused of knowingly buying supplies at inflated prices. And last year, authorities arrested a regional official responsible for deciding if people were disabled enough to avoid military service. When they raided Tatiana Krupa's house, officials found nearly $6 million in cash, along with lists of fake disability certificates. Corruption is something everyone has an opinion on. What do you think about corruption in Ukraine in general? Is there corruption in Ukraine? Yes. At what level have you encountered corruption yourself? From here to here. If there were no theft, then maybe the pensions would be bigger. This corruption didn't start yesterday. It's been constant. I have never bribed anyone, and no one has ever bribed me. We work in a commercial structure where everything is transparent, open. It should be like that in the state, but unfortunately, it's not like that. We need to fight this at the level of a family doctor, a teacher. First, we need to start with ourselves, and then at a higher level. For a long time, pressure on the government to tackle corruption and protect democracy came from outside.
The US voice was always one of the most vivid and one of the strongest in anti-corruption and good governance and judicial reforms. But everything has changed in America. Then it became the expectation that the EU will take the lead, because we are on the EU accession mode, and there are many things we have to do in terms of rule of law.
This pressure from inside the country has prompted President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to undo most of the issues regarding NABU and SAP, the two anti-corruption agencies. But some of the damage may remain.
Russian propaganda definitely will use it in order to advocate against us. It's also risked because the forces inside the European countries will use it in order to advocate against us, like AfD in Germany or Marine Le Pen in France. But there is also the positive, I see. At some point, I had a feeling that the European leaders are so in a honeymoon with the Ukraine that they don't see the real problems.
The people will be watching closely, determined to hold their leaders to account, even in the midst of war.